Okay, so again, welcome everybody to another riveting C4 meeting. In all seriousness, it's a big topic this evening for us to be getting together and talking about. So the welcome and introduction. So everybody tends to jump around the screen unless, so I'm going to do my best to go through the list here and call people out. So Mr. Silva.
Yes, I'm present.
Great. Mayor Drinkwine.
I'm here.
Okay. Julie Fitzgerald, Mayor of Wilsonville.
Here.
Paul Gornick. Metro Councilor Christine Lewis.
Present.
Let's see, county staff, Devin Ellen.
I'm here.
Okay. Now everyone see, there we go, jumping around. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Talking to me?
Yes, Mr. Gronke.
Ed Gronke, Clackamas County Citizens Rep to Impact.
All right. Mr. Brashear.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I'm the transit director for SMART and the new BOSS, which is Bus on Shoulder. So thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Schmidt.
Hi, I'm Gary Schmidt, Clackamas County Administrator, and I used to help staff C4 for 10 years, and I missed you all. It's great to see you again. Thank you.
It's nice to have you, sir. Mr. Buck.
I am here.
You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, Joe Buck, Mayor of Lake Oswego.
There we go. Miss Jules Walters.
Good evening. I'm Jules Walters, Mayor of Westland. Nice to see everyone.
Commissioner Schrader. I think we read your lips, so perfect. Thank you. Martin Myers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Myers. I'm the CPO C4 rep. I'm out of Redland, Viola, Fisher's Mill.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mayor Lyle Smith.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Lyle Smith, Mayor of the City of Oregon City.
Wonderful. Mr. Gamba.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see all your smiling faces. Mark Gamba, Mayor of Milwaukee.
Miss Pratt.
Hello, Valerie Pratt, Fulton City Council, and really glad about the boss guy over there at SMART.
Mr. Brown.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Vahid Brown, the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
Perfect. Thank you. Ms. Christopherson.
Good evening, everybody. Teresa Christopherson with Clackamas County Social Services. I'm here as a representative for rural transit.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Pulliam.
Man, it's a long roll call. I'm here.
Just trying to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Let's see, Mr. Cook.
Hello, Rodney Cook, Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services for Clackamas County.
Thank you for being here, sir. And I think I got everybody. Did I get everybody? Mr. Commissioner Savas in co-chair.
Paul Savas, co-chair C4, Clackamas County Commissioner. Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much. I'm Trent Wilson. I'm county staff here who support the C4 committee. And since I have the floor for just a second, I think it's appropriate to run through the attendees list. We have some honored guests I'd like to call out real quick for the record. Chris Lyons here, also with Government Affairs at Clackamas County. Cole Merkel from Here Together, I believe. Council President Hensley from Canby, she's an alternate. Dana Webb from Oregon City, our city staff there. Jamie Lorenzini, Happy Valley staff. James Civiletti, I believe that's Clackamas Review. Former C4 member, Jeff Goodman, always a pleasure to have him here. Marjorie Stewart, our CPO alternate. Mark Ottened, Wilsonville staff. Nancy Bush, our county operating officer. Gary's number 2, new to the role, so happy to have her here. Commissioner Sonia Fisher, thanks for coming. That makes it a quorum for our C4 meeting for our county commission. Sue Hildick, my boss and our director here at PGA. Tom Markgraf, our alternate in urban transit for TriMet. And then I believe Tony, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering your last name, but she's also our interim housing director, or interim director for housing authority. Big group.
Great. Extensive group here this evening. And again, I'm Brian Hodson. I'm the mayor of Canby and your co-chair for C4. Thank you all for doing that. Appreciate it. Next up is housekeeping. So looking for approval of the minutes for the September 2nd, 2021 C4 meeting.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Martin.
Second,
Thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald. I appreciate it. So we have a first and a second. Any comments or just changes or discussion items? No hands going up. Oh, wait. Mayor Walters, you need to unmute. Mayor Walters, you need to unmute.
I thought I did, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, everyone. I just wanted to mention that I was at the meeting, but I arrived pretty late, but I'm not listed on the attendees.
Okay, thank you. Trent will update that.
Thank you very much. Also, the link that in the minutes that goes to the webpage is a broken link, so we can fix that too. So 2 updates.
2 updates, perfect. Mayor Fitzgerald, did you have something? I saw your hand waving as well. No, okay. Okay, so motion's been made. Is those that made the motion with the amendments, Mr. Myers, you're good with the amended piece? Okay, is the second okay with that as well? Okay, seeing head nods, I'll take it. All those in favor?
aye.
Hands around. Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes pass. Okay, next on our agenda this evening is the big conversation about Clackamas County housing. We've got a couple of Clackamas County staff here to present and get us up to speed. I will remind everyone, if you open up your participant window and if you do have questions as we go through here, I will please, raise your hand. That way I can see who has a question or a comment to make. I will do my best to keep that the hands moving through if there are questions. And then if there's things in the chat box, I will also do my best to keep up on those as well. I'm sure those here with Mr. Cook's team will also do the same and try to keep up on that as well. So presenting tonight, we have the Housing Authority of Clackamas County team, led there by Mr. Cook, Director of Housing and Human Services, Devin Allen and Vahid Brown that are here. So Mr. Cook, I'll let you start us off, okay?
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having us. Well, first I'll just get you more acquainted with myself. So my name's Rod Cook. I was recently appointed to the director, but I have been with the county for over 25 years. I raised my children in Gladstone and served on their school board, so real familiar with schools working with cities and what that entails. And I recently moved to Milwaukee, so Mayor Gamba will get to know me pretty well, living in the Oak Grove area, kind of close to Commissioner Savas. As most of you probably have watched our community's demographic change pretty drastically over the last decade, I'd say. And I've used my time at the county addressing the gangs when they first came to Clackamas County, drug and alcohol abuse across the nation, school dropout here in Clackamas County schools, domestic violence. Some of you are probably familiar with our Safe Place, and poverty overall. And so I say all that just to say, I want you to know that we take this issue very seriously, and are here tonight to demonstrate our commitment as individuals, our commitment as a county, our commitment as a department. We are here to stand with you, and we look forward to this relation. We think this is a partnership in the making. We look forward to talking to you individually and collectively in the future as we move forward together. I have with me tonight our experts who are Devin Allen, who is the development manager for HAC, and then Vahid Brown, who is the supportive housing services manager. We hope in our presentation tonight to give you an overview of affordable housing and Metro bond funded projects and our progress on supportive housing services measure or the initiative. I do want to mention that we are in the contract negotiations with Metro. So if we get into some details, we may not be able to answer all your questions tonight, but we do believe this is going to be an ongoing partnership. And as things go forward, we will give you answers to any questions you might raise. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to, I think Vahid is handling our slides tonight. So I'm gonna give you a brief overview of just Housing Authority. Jill Smith, some of you probably know her well. She recently took a job with the state. Today was her last day. So I'm stepping in for her on this piece. And Tony Carter, who was mentioned earlier, will be the interim public health, not public health, the Housing Authority Director interim until we find a replacement for Jill. And so first, you can go to the next slide, Vahid. First piece, this is just what, overview of what housing authorities do for those of you who are not familiar. Public housing, and basically our public housing, our homes and duplexes, we own and operate and rent to low-income families with no rent exceeding 30% of the family's income. Fun fact that we like to give you is that we're the oldest and the first housing authority in Oregon, and some of our public housing is also the oldest. Affordable housing is another piece that we do in the Housing Authority. It's housing we own and operate with rents reduced below market, and is primarily apartments like Eastern Ridge, Hillside Manor, etc. Third, we have our rent assistance programs. What I know these even by, they're usually known as choice vouchers, where low-income families rent private market landlords with rental subsidy to make it affordable. Fourth, we have asset management and finance, and that's basically our operations, and it's paid for through the rent we collect and some grant administrative fees. No county dollars support our particular operations for that effort. The next piece, the next two are what we're going to talk to you more about in depth tonight. So we have Devin, who's going to talk about the affordable housing development pieces and the affordable housing. And then we'll have followed up with Vahid, who will talk to us about the supportive housing services that we've all been discussing quite frequently lately. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Devin, and she'll give you a quick overview of our Housing Authority development efforts. Devin?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Devin Ellen. I'm the Housing Development Manager with the Housing Authority. And among other things, my department oversees the administration of the county's Affordable Housing Bond Program, also known as the Metro Bond Program. And just so that we're all on the same page, this program provides funding for capital costs associated with the development of affordable units and is separate but complementary to the supportive housing services measure. Next slide, please. So as you all know, the nearly $653 million bond measure was approved by voters at the end of 2018. And each county contributes a different percentage of property taxes based on how many of the county's homes fall within that boundary. So this means approximately 45% of the homes created through the bond will be in Multnomah County, 34% in Washington County, and 21% here in Clackamas County. The total bond revenues dedicated to Clackamas County are just over $116 million. And as a county without entitlement cities, all bond resources run through the Housing Authority. So after finalizing our local implementation strategy, we released our first Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA, in January of 2020. And in response, a total of $43 million was awarded to subsidize the development of 414 units over 3 projects that are located in Happy Valley, Oregon City, and unincorporated Clackamas County. And we're aiming to release our second NOFA in June of next year. and hope to make approximately 23 million available with the goal of supporting the development of 200 new affordable units. Next slide, please. So to date, we've awarded 48 million or 42% of our total bond allocation to support 4 projects. This includes our phase 1 pilot project in Gladstone. With 42% awarded, we're tracking towards 57% of our total unit production goal with 461 units underway. This includes 201 30% AMI units, bringing us to 60% of our total production goal, and 292 family size units, which gets us all the way to 73% of our production goal. We're currently at about 16% of our 60 to 80% AMI unit production, but we anticipate supporting more of these units within our Hillside Park project and in partnership with first-time homebuyer programs. Next slide, please. So this is the Housing Authority's development pipeline. The blue shaded projects have already or are likely to utilize Metro bond funding. And as you can see, we have a lot of affordable units underway throughout the county in all stages of development. We have Rosewood Station in unincorporated Clackamas County, which is 212 units that were completed this summer. We have Clayton Moore Commons in Oregon City, which is a 24-unit development dedicated to veterans and their families, which was completed in late 2020. We have Hillside Manor in Milwaukee, which was a 100-unit renovation program completed last month. Our pilot project, Webster Road in Gladstone, is a 48-unit permanent supportive housing development, and it's scheduled to open next July. We have Fuller Road Station in unincorporated Clackamas County. This is a 100-unit TOD project slated to open in third quarter 2022. We have Maple Apartments in Oregon City, 171 units scheduled to start construction in March, and Good Shepherd Village in Happy Valley, which is 143 units slated to start construction in February. We have Merrillhurst Commons in Lake Oswego, which is going to be 100 units of family housing scheduled to start construction in the second half of next year, and Malala Apartments in Malala, 60 units also slated to start construction in the second half of next year. The remaining projects are in early stages of pre-development, but both the Boones Ferry and Hillside Park projects have recently made significant progress related to the land use and rezoning needed to support future housing development. And I've already touched upon our second NOFA, which we plan to release next summer with the goal of availing $23 million. So that concludes my part of the presentation. And now I'll pass it to Vahid to talk about supportive housing.
Thank you, Devin. I am going to make it so I can see what I'm talking about. Again, I'm Vahid Brown, Supportive Housing Services Program Manager for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Just going to provide an update on our work with the Supportive Housing Services Program. I think most of the folks in this Zoom are familiar with the Supportive Housing Services measure, but just very briefly, this is a tax-funded program being implemented in the 3 metro counties based on a ballot measure tax that was passed by voters in the 3 counties in the metro service districts. 21.3% of the revenue goes to Clackamas County for the support of supportive housing services programs. We and our partner counties in the region, Multnomah and Washington County, have local implementation plans that guide the work. Those were developed and completed in the spring of this year, and disbursements from the tax measure began in July of this year. The supportive housing services funds can be used broadly on really anything it takes to end someone's homelessness. So that includes supportive housing services, which is itself an extremely broad category. That can be, again, anything it takes in terms of the supports that are needed for households and individuals that have potentially very challenging barriers to remaining housed and require a wide variety or panoply of services to support their success in housing. long-term rent assistance. So the ARLA, which is unfortunately the only kind of pronounceable way we've come up with for RLRA. If you have an idea for how better to say that than ARLA, we're open to it. And short-term rent assistance for households, housing navigation and placement services. This is folks working with households experiencing homelessness, helping them access rent assistance, and then helping them find a rental unit on the market or a housing unit for them and their family. Eviction prevention services to prevent more folks becoming homeless in the county, as well as shelter and transitional housing, emergency safety off the streets interventions. The local implementation plan that was developed in the spring and passed by our local implementation plan steering committee, our Board of County Commissioners, the Regional Oversight Committee, and Metro Council had a number of investment priorities for phase 1 or year 1 of program implementation. And those are listed here. These are based largely on the results of extensive community engagement and outreach across the county and the work of our local implementation plan steering committee, which was a diverse and representative body of residents of the county who helped shape and inform the plan. So those are increasing shelter capacity, expanding culturally specific services, expanding wraparound services for housing stability. That's kind of in that supportive housing services category, increasing all types of outreach and placement services, building on successful programs that are high performing and are already serving the priority population that this measure is meant to serve. And that is, if I haven't stated it already, folks experiencing long-term homelessness who are disabled. Converting vouchers and other housing supports that are time limited into long-term support, increasing internal capacity for the administration of homeless services, and allocating funds for outreach. This is a kind of a where we're at, the timeline of the process from the passage of soon after the passage of the measure last year. We did an extensive engagement to inform the plan, develop the plan, had that plan approved and reviewed and approved by the relevant bodies. Beginning in this fiscal year, we issued a procurement and a request for proposal. We have just in the last several weeks had 4 of the contracts that resulted from that request for proposals approved by our board. Another contract that is currently in negotiations that resulted from that procurement will be going to our board in the next weeks. The priority for the kind of the rollout of supportive housing services in this phase of our implementation is kind of identified here. We're designing and evaluating programs with a racial equity lens, and part of that included partnerships with the Coalition of Communities of Color and Unite Oregon to assist us in our outreach and engagement with communities of color in the development of the plan. And the Coalition of Communities of Color conducted a racial equity analysis of our coordinated entry system to identify disparities in how people access services, communities of color access services, and how whether we can identify disparities in program outcomes for communities of color, to build supportive housing capacity. And that is with both internally and externally, right? We have to build out the county's administrative capacity to administer what is a quintupling or more of what has traditionally been our resources for addressing homelessness in our county. But we also have to grow the network of providers and community-based organizations that provide housing services. The regional long-term rent assistance and supportive housing case management are kind of the focus of our first contracts and first programs that we're rolling out now, and I'll talk about those in a second. Ensuring that participants in time-limited programs and emergency shelter programs transition to stable housing. That has been an immediate priority. That's been the focus of my team since the beginning of the fiscal year. That work, kind of entailed surveying and identifying programs that are time limited and households that would be at the risk of experiencing homelessness when the funding for those programs ended, and prioritizing and ensuring that we transition those households into stable and permanent housing immediately. Stabilizing shelter programs overall, and I already kind of mentioned building internal capacity, and then working with our partners, Multnomah, Washington, and Metro in developing a regional aspects of this effort. So the kind of the program rollout, things that we have initiated thus far, the two emergency shelter, transitional shelter programs that did exist prior to this fiscal year, Serenity and Haven House, were funded through a variety of sources over the years, beginning with state funding. There was some limited time kind of gap funding provided by Health, Housing, and Human Services for a year or more to forestall the closure of those programs due to a reduction in state funding. That was coming to an end. That would have come to an end at the beginning of this fiscal year. These are two programs that provide transitional shelter, transitional housing for people exiting incarceration who would otherwise be homeless and have disabling conditions. These people are the part of the priority community that this measure is meant to serve. And so funding those programs to maintain and continue their services was one of the first things that we've done. But also there was a large COVID-related hotel motel emergency shelter strategy that was deployed by Health, Housing, and Human Services during the pandemic to provide safety off the streets for highly vulnerable people experiencing homelessness who are at risk of severe infection or disease from COVID-19. That program, was around 100 hotel rooms supporting upwards of 150 people who would otherwise be exposed to the elements and to this infection. That was funded through FEMA dollars, and that program would have also shut down without continued support. So providing support to those programs to continue them until we could kind of go into the next set of program implementation, which is these 5 contracts listed here. And these are really meant to do a number of things. We initiated the ARLA program, the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance. So now there's new vouchers, new housing assistance being administered by the Housing Authority to households. And we've awarded contracts for these agencies listed here: Northwest Family Services, Clackamas Women's Services, Greater New Hope Family Services, Impact Northwest, and El Programa, to provide housing navigation and placement services to the households that were living in the emergency shelter program, the motel shelter, hotel motel COVID-19 emergency shelter. So in addition to not just allowing that program to be unfunded and to send 121 people back into the streets, we maintained that shelter program with funding to keep it going. And now these 5 agencies are working with the households that were sheltered in the motel to move into housing with rent assistance. So that's the kind of the first part of their mission. There were other programs that were time limited. Some of them were related to COVID emergency funding, like emergency shelter grant, rapid rehousing dollars that came through Health, Housing, and Human Services last year. Households served with those rent assistance programs would lose their rent assistance without support from this program. So that's another group of folks that are receiving services from our partners here. And then there was a 1-year rent assistance program that was a region-wide program built through investment from HealthShare called Metro 300. We housed over 80 families in Clackamas County who were elderly and disabled, who were experiencing homelessness through that program. And all of those are being bridged into permanent housing support with the help of these partners here and with the great work of staff at the Housing Authority. I will mention that 2 of the 5 new agencies that are listed here, Greater New Hope Family Services and El Programa, are culturally specific agencies. So they're coming into the fold, into the family of housing programs in Clackamas County. Already helps us to further our goal of expanding culturally specific programming. We really had very little to no culturally specific programming, culturally specific services offered to communities of color in the housing space in Clackamas County at this time. So that's great. Next steps, we are in negotiations, as Rod Cook mentioned, with the other 2 counties and Metro on intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, that will govern the relationship between the 3 counties and Metro and revenue distribution for the next 10 years. Those have been productive, good faith, frequent, and very time-consuming negotiations, but we are making great progress and moving ahead, meeting weekly, sometimes at length, to hammer out the details of that intergovernmental agreement. There is the Administrators Housing Strategy Task Force that is staffed by department leadership in Clackamas County and 2 of our Clackamas County commissioners that are continuing to kind of monitor the cash flow from the revenue and from and expenditures as we initiate programming, and working to identify resources to expand program rollout, building out programs as funding allows, using the investment priorities of the local implementation plan to guide that expansion, and working to achieve our year 1 local implementation plan goals as funding allows. That's mine. That's what I've got by way of an update on supportive housing services program. Here's our contact information. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that information and downloading us on everything that's been going on. I know this is not a small feat to get to even where we're at now and where we want to go. I'm sure that there are plenty of questions and discussion items to be had here. So again, I guess it's on the bottom of your screens there, the raise hand function. So as you raise your hands, I'll pop to my top of my list here, and I'll give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions or make their comments. So Commissioner Savas, you're first.
Yeah, whether it's Rod or Vahid, could you just speak to some of the direct funding, like the 29 housing placements that are done, and some of the other programs that are direct funded versus going through nonprofits? Could one of you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, so the long-term rent assistance program, which is really the paying for folks' housing and coupling that with supportive services, that is creating permanent supportive housing. So we're trying to achieve, a little over 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing expansion in Clackamas County over this 10-year period. That's part of our goal, our share of a region-wide 5,000 unit goal. As of November 1, we had 29 regional long-term rent assistance vouchers issued. Over the fiscal year, that would be $334,000 in funds going to support the housing of those families. Over a calendar year, that's $522,000. That's just 1 month's work of the voucher team issuing vouchers to households, and we will be issuing about 30 vouchers per month at the current staff level of the RLIP program team. And as that grows, the number of vouchers we can issue per month will grow. So that direct investment in the housing of folks that were previously experiencing homelessness is happening now, and every day and week it expands, and more dollars are going into those programs into contracts with landlords. So that those dollars are also going into our community, because those are contracts that exist with landlords in Clackamas County. There's also of the 4 contracts of the 5 that I mentioned in my slides that have been executed. The total contract value for those programs is about $2.3 million. And another contract is going to be coming forward to the board this month. Let's see. Am I missing anything, Commissioner Savas or Rod? I think I spoke to the things you asked about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think you got it.
Vahid, can you repeat that number to the 5,000? So it's a 10-year goal to hit 5,000. What's the 5,000 again? I was writing that down and missed it.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I kind of said that really fast. So regionally, across the metro region of the 3 counties, there's a goal associated with this program, the Supportive Housing Services Program, of increasing our permanent supportive housing supply by 5,000 units.
Okay.
And we agreed regionally that we would proportionally work towards that goal in the same proportions as we receive revenue from the measure. So our 21.3% of the revenue comes with it a commitment that we will be creating 21.3% of those 5,000 units, which is 1,065 exactly. And with our investments in year one, we will be more than a quarter of the way there.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Ms. Pratt.
My questions have to do with when you have say a family who say they're extremely low income and they get into housing, and then maybe they start to make a little more money, but they're still maybe say they're 50% of AMI, so they really can't afford what's full price in the market. And what are your plans to deal with those type of situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think with it varies with some HUD vouchers and HUD rent assistance, but with the supportive housing services program, a household that has very low income would, in many cases, be contributing nothing to rent initially. I mean, the priority population are disabled households with long histories of homelessness. So many of these households have no income at all. But when the household income goes up above 30% of AMI or area median income, and a third of their income can go towards rent, then that happens. Then they have a share of rent that increases as their rent increases, and our share of the rent assistance decreases. And when a household is able to pay 100% of the rent, we have a period of time where we're still in the relationship. We will be paying $0 towards their housing assistance payment, their HAP, per month for a number of months until we will graduate them from the program, it's called, and they will no longer be receiving assistance. But of course, they would be eligible to be recipients of assistance if they needed it in the future.
Great, thank you for that. Mayor Gamba.
Thank you for that. Vahid, it sounds like you're doing extraordinary things with limited funding. I do have kind of a series of very specific questions to try and understand a particular part of this. The homeless population in Clackamas County, is it predominantly single men, single women, families? What's the
I think that I don't know that it's predominantly anything. I think that the single largest demographic amongst the folks that we're well aware of in our system are single adults. So that's about 650 people. In a kind of a total population of folks experiencing homelessness, depending on how we define it and count it, of between 1,200 and 2,500 people. About 270 people in 2020 were chronically homeless, and most of those were individuals, adults, but some were households. I think that my caveat, depends on how you count it, matters a lot when it comes to family homelessness, and also homelessness among some of our kind of sub-communities within the county and within the state. I mean, some communities of colors, homelessness looks different than it does for white people. There may be situations of being doubled up, or many families living in one apartment that is less visible and doesn't show up in a HUD street pit count, right? So now I'm just kind of rambling, Mayor Gamba, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just remembering from a report a few years ago that we had a preponderance of families that were homeless in Clackamas County, as opposed to, say, Multnomah, which had a preponderance of single males. But be that as it may, I guess my next question is, how many shelters for families do we have in Clackamas County?
So there's the Annie Ross House is a dedicated shelter for families experiencing homelessness. There are families served in shelter programs that are operated by Clackamas Women's Services and sheltering activity programs that are operated by Northwest Family Services. But a physical shelter, like a site-based location as opposed to motel vouchers or other forms of providing shelter assistance to families is one. That's Annie Ross House.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So in the list of things that we were to do with the new bond funds for wraparound services was to stabilize shelter programs and overall system. Do you know at this point if the contract with the Annie Ross House has increased, has been reduced, has remained the same?
I do not know the answer to that question. So the Annie Ross House is not a program that is currently funded by the Supportive Housing Services program. The agencies that are funded were identified in the slides. So Northwest Housing Alternatives, which operates the Annie Ross House, is not. Northwest Housing Alternatives didn't apply to apply to the request for proposals for navigation and placement services and supportive housing case management in that round.
I was under the impression that they had a contract with the county, that a certain amount of their funding came through a contract with the county.
Yes, Northwest Housing Alternatives has had contracts, and I'm sure they do have contracts with Health, Housing, and Human Services. I do not hold or administer any of those contracts. I don't know if Rod Cook or Teresa Christopherson, I'm not sure if Social Services has contracts with Northwest Housing Alternatives, but I can't speak to those contracts myself.
Do either of the other people just mentioned happen to know the answer to my question? I mean, we have one family shelter, one physical family shelter in Clackamas County. And part of their funding comes through Clackamas County. And as I understand it, their contract was not increased when this bond measure passed. It was in fact decreased. They, instead of having their typical 1-year contract, they now have a 6-month contract, which makes it very hard for them to staff. That's my understanding of the situation at our one single family shelter in Clackamas County.
So Rod, could you speak to that a little bit? Would you mind? Because I know that we've worked with Annie Ross House for a very, very long time, and they are only one of the number of folks that we work with to do this work. And I was hopeful you could talk to, there has been all this roiling out there about cuts, and I don't know how accurate that is. I've never thought it was accurate, but maybe you could add something, and Gary too, if you want to.
Yeah. I don't want to misspeak, but I will say, here's what I do know, that there are multiple contracts that we have with providers that we're working to get online, and some of them were given a 6-month, I'll call it bridge funding, with hopes that the supportive housing funds would come through. And when they didn't, that is what caused the glitch in the thinking on how they were going to progress the programs from one funding source to another. But I could tell you, because I'm the one the contracts are coming through, that I've talked to Trell Anderson, if we're talking about one of his programs, we're working with some of those contracts to get those online, and our office specifically is working with our social services division, who holds those contracts, to get some of those contracts in place. I'd have to get back to you on specificity in terms of dollar amounts and all that. I don't have that in front of me, but I can tell you I'm in contact with Trell quite frequently over this issue.
So you just confirmed what I understood, which is that instead of a 1-year contract that they had, they now have a 6-month contract, because you were whoever was intending to switch them over to the wraparound services.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, I guess my last question, and I'm sorry I've taken so much time, but my last question is, or anybody relative to the other two counties? Are we ramping up as fast and providing as much services relative, I get, to the population, blah, blah, blah. But all other things being equal, are we ramping up this work at the same rate that the other two counties are?
Okay, I'll handle that. I thought he was talking to Vahid. I can't speak to the other counties. I really can't. I can just tell you that we are now, I feel like we're on track to hit that, at least that 75 plus mark of our goals that we planned for in this fiscal year. Are we as quick as the other counties? I don't know, because I don't know all their funding sources. I don't know their capabilities before and after the Supportive Housing Services Initiative came into play. There's just too many variables at play to make that like that comparison as if we're apples to apples. And so I don't feel like I'm in a place to do that, but I will say that all I can tell you is that our board has recently said yes to drawing down some of the loan funds for Metro. They've recently given some of their ARPA funds to this effort. And like I said, I believe that our board is committed and serious about ramping up and getting us where we need to be. I know I'll be spending a lot of time with the Supportive Housing Services Initiative personally. Vahid's very capable, and we're doing everything we possibly can to integrate even other dollars that we have available to us into this effort so we can move it forward. So that's all I can give you. I can't. I don't think it's the answer you're looking for, but that's the answer I can give you tonight with all honesty and transparency.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba. Before I go to you, Mayor Buck, there's a chat thing. Appears to be from Paul Gornick. Has COVID affected the annual point in time survey of the homelessness the past 2 years?
Yes, there was. So the Clackamas County conducts the HUD mandated point in time count every 2 years on odd numbered years. In 2021, we did not conduct the count in the same way that we traditionally have, in the sense that we didn't have a street count that involves a lot of person-to-person close contact and was not deemed to be a safe activity in the context of the pandemic. A waiver was sought to conduct that point in time count through a little bit of a different measure using our coordinated entry information. And the HUD approved our waiver, and our PIT report based on that coordinated entry data is under, I think it's being finalized now.
Great, thank you. Mayor Buck.
Thank you. And Vahid, Rod, and Devin, thank you for the great presentation and for being here tonight on the topic. So it's just specific questions kind of about the implementation. So how it works on the ground. So we get our public safety officials, the police, fire, and behavioral health person. They'll have contact with the houseless folks, in the community, and they provide them with resources, right now. How will implementation of supported housing services, how will that communication work with, people on the ground in our various communities, and how will they connect them better with those resources than they're able to do right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Mayor Buck. I think that, the initial kind of program investment and implementation priorities were those that I identified, and that a lot of that focus was on households that were, really have very time limited support in some critical way that was going to be kind of disappearing. And this was a kind of a critical emergency. So our focus was on moving folks who would be exiting a motel shelter program to the streets into housing. But with the recent decision by the Board of County Commissioners to dedicate ARPA dollars to maintain that hotel motel shelter program, that frees up about $2.23 million for supportive housing services implementation. So outreach and kind of coordinated entry is a primary focus of that next wave of investments. We have a subcommittee of our continuum of care called Outreach Connections. We do welcome the participation of law enforcement agencies, and many of them are part of our kind of email list. That group met today. By coincidence, we meet every month. And it's really a kind of a place for folks who are involved in the community in their professional capacity and whatever it is, in kind of directly interfacing with people experiencing homelessness. And so we're getting information about our programs to that community through that forum. But, really increasing our outreach capacity, and part of which is to liaise with other agencies like local law enforcement, local food banks, and so forth. That's a major priority. I mean, it came up twice in the list of year one investment priorities, right? Expand outreach of all types and continue to invest in outreach. So that's kind of like, once we shored up the, kind of put the fire out of, talking about a lot of people. I mean, almost 250 households who would have been falling into homelessness in Clackamas County if we didn't focus our investments in this first stage on housing them. But the next effort is to really kind of get boots on the ground out into the community.
Well, I not to speak for everyone else here, but I would imagine a lot of us as those kind of boots on the ground right now have these connections. If there's anything that we can do to connect you and your team with these various organizations in our communities who may be touching folks that may be in need of these services and may not even know that they are available, I'm sure we'd all be glad to do that. And my next question, so this one estimate I hear from the state is about 25% of folks statewide that would qualify for rent assistance receive it, right? So 3/4 of folks, families that would qualify for rent assistance aren't able because resources are limited through these kind of current HUD programs. So what will, I don't know if you have numbers on what the gap is in Clackamas County between families that need, but the average family right now that goes, and applies for a HUD, for the Housing Choice Voucher program, how long do they have to wait for a voucher? And how does the HUD voucher program, how will that relate to the short-term, long-term voucher programs under supportive housing services? And what, with in regards to the wait times, because you just hear the rumors are that they're just, horribly long, 8 years people will sit on a wait list for a Housing Choice Voucher.
Yeah, and Tony Carter, who is I think in the audience, put in the chat that wait on average is 2 to 3 years. And Tony, that's for a Housing Choice Voucher, if I'm not mistaken. I think that for, there's a lot of different voucher programs. A number of them, the Housing Authority has focused, almost exclusively on people experiencing homelessness, preference vouchers, mainstream vouchers. We were issued 41 emergency housing vouchers with kind of new federal dollars that came through in the context of the pandemic. Clackamas County was the first county to make full utilization of its allotment of emergency housing vouchers. We were the first housing authority in the state to fully lease 41 households that were for those 41 vouchers. The first county by far to fully lease our full allotment of emergency housing vouchers. That was done in 1 month, by the way. Shout out to our voucher team. So there's very close integration with the HUD vouchers and the Supportive Housing Services Program team. When we were looking at the emergency that I was describing and kind of shoring up issues where people were going to be losing housing, if I'm waiting on getting a contract in place to have a housing navigation and placement agency, I was working directly with my colleagues in the Housing Authority to identify other available vouchers that could be utilized. So that the Metro 300 folks, for example, who had 1 year of rent assistance, some of those households were issued their rent assistance very early in the program. And so their rent assistance ran out months ago. And, I was not getting programs out months ago, not to the extent we are now. And so we were able to identify some of those households for these emergency housing vouchers and keep them housed. So it's closely coordinated.
So someone, if they're on the HUD list, and, they've been waiting a couple of years, when supportive housing services, when these programs, come to implementation and the funding, do they reapply for that program, or is it, there's just now more funding and they'll move to the top of the list faster? I'd probably have to have a conversation with Tony Carter about specific HUD lists, but for households who are, housing insecure or experiencing homelessness and have been in touch with the county about that need, the primary point of contact is our coordinated entry system. If they're on
I guess the reason I was saying I'd want to talk with Tony is that I don't know 100% if everyone who's on, because you can apply to a housing choice voucher wait list for any housing authority in the country from anywhere in the country. So someone living in Atlanta can get on the wait list in Clackamas County for a Section 8 voucher, for a housing choice voucher. Someone in Atlanta is not likely to call our coordinated entry system and be assessed for services and programs. So everyone who is on our wait list in our coordinated entry system, once those resources with supportive housing services are there, by vulnerability and acuity, those folks will be moving into housing. I'm sure that there's a lot of overlap with folks on that wait list, with folks on the housing choice voucher wait list, but I don't think it's an automatic process. And Tony, correct me if I'm wrong.
Gotcha.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Appreciate it.
Mayor Hodson, I don't want to miss this opportunity. I don't want to overspeak again, but Mayor Buck asked a question about how we connect with your people on the ground, boots on the ground. And so part of tonight, I hope one of the things that comes out tonight is that we create this relationship, because you're the leaders in your community. You have access to your police chiefs, you have access to your schools, you have access to all the stakeholders. And so what we want to do is have individual conversations with you to see what's going to work in your particular locale, because as you know, it's really up to the leadership in terms of how far we're going to go with any of this. I mean, I have churches already calling me saying, can we change zoning laws so they can have small housing in their parking lots, or can they have trailer overnight parking and those type of things? These are the kind of things that we need your endorsement on, and we need the mayors behind us to make some of this go forward. So, and it's like there's a lot of you, and I'm sure each of your jurisdictions treat things differently. I was on one little school board in Gladstone, and I could tell you our Gladstone was much different than Oregon City or North Clackamas, any of those. And then at the building level, it even got more complex. So we just want to we are honestly asking that this is the start. I'm sure you've all have been having a conversation. I'm new to this. So let me just say, I would like to have a conversation with some of you. And I know Mayor Gamba's people, my second day in, they gave me a call and let me know if they were serious about housing, and that I needed to know that. So those are the kind of conversations we want to have, so we can move this forward together, because I think there's resources on both sides. And we're not integrating our resources. We're not, putting things together so we can move faster on this agenda. So that's what we're all about, and we're trying to really integrate as we move forward. So I didn't want to miss that opportunity to take you up on that offer to do more together. Because
thank you. We will be in touch.
All right.
Thank you again, Mayor Buck. Appreciate it. I guess I'm next on the list here, and then Councillor Lewis. My question is for Miss Ellen. I'm going to take some heat here off of the heat for a couple of minutes. My two questions regarding the Housing Authority Development Update is, number one, how can cities that are not on the list of having development projects get either in queue or programs in front of the Housing Authority to maybe get projects going?
Yeah, I would say one of the paths of least resistance would be to work with a nonprofit housing developer or for-profit developer who specializes in affordable housing, come up with a concept to submit at the for the June 2022 notice of funding availability.
Great, thank you for that. And then my last question that I have for you is regarding the Clackamas round 2 NOFA funding of $23 million. Right now we're projecting the 200 units to be developed in 2022 or around there. How is the current inflationary pieces that are going on going to impact that? Is that number already considering that impact, or is that still yet to be determined? So that number could be less.
Yeah, that's really an estimate. The affordable housing bond is is part of, what we call the capital stack that goes towards developing units. So typically projects have, 5 or 6 different sources that fund each development, including low-income housing tax credits, gap funding through Oregon Housing and Community Services, sometimes county funds, and certainly cost escalation around materials and construction costs going up is something that we're watching closely. But from what I've seen so far, that number seems reasonable, like a reasonable estimate.
Great, thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Thank you so much for the presentation tonight, and in particular, just for making time to have both the services side and the bond development side explained side by side. I think those have to be paired together because you can't supply services to people who don't have a unit, and oftentimes people who have a unit need at least one kind of service, whether it's placement or stability. My question comes to the contracts under SHS. There was an RFP on the street, got taken off, and then a more limited RFP went out. Obviously, that was when we went from the whole menu of everything that was in the local implementation plan to just the targeted services that we saw on the slide tonight. Can somebody speak to, one, the timeline for getting those other services funded or at least included in RFP, and 2, how the organizations that maybe applied to the first RFP have been communicated with, and how they're going to be able to reapply in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Lewis. I think there are a number of kind of things underway. One, first of all, with respect to the agencies that applied to the first RFP that was issued, I think in April or May, it's COVID time has really, I think, rattled, for my sense of time, I apologize. That very large RFP that was withdrawn when we deemed that the amount that was procured for was not commensurate with revenues at the time we began implementation. We did communicate with all of the providers about that, the reason for the withdrawal of the procurement, and held a listening session with those providers and any other interested provider. I think that we're working with Public and Government Affairs on kind of organizing a kind of a next round of engagement and listening session kind of activities with the provider community. And the 3 counties are working together on a kind of a regional procurement concept that would qualify a very large body of providers across all aspects of supportive services with an emphasis on culturally specific organizations, but not only culturally specific organizations, mainstream providers as well, so that we would reduce the sort of administrative burden on providers. To many providers that are providing these services in our region work in all 3 counties or in 2 of the counties. Many of the specialist providers that we really need their services in Clackamas County don't yet work in Clackamas County and work primarily in Multnomah County or Washington County. And so there's a need for a lot of our agency partners to do regional work. And so rather than have them respond to 3 different procurements to execute 3 different contracts to do the same kinds of work, we're working on coordinating our procurement activities with the plan to initiate a RFP queue, a regional RFP queue by year's end or around year's end, and in the first several months of the next calendar year, procure services of all types according to need and based on the timeline of our funding to fill gaps and help us achieve our plan goals. Remind me if I've missed any parts of your question.
I don't think you have. I think that's good to hear. And I do think listening session, info session, that's helpful. And just knowing that, yeah, you've been thinking about how to do the work touching folks who are here, but also the regional folks. That's a good balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. Before, just real quick in the comment box, Commissioner Schrader asked, going back to Mr. Cook's comments about partnerships, would our cities be willing to use some of their ARPA dollars to increase their housing capacity? I think that's something that I think each city needs to answer on their own, but that could be used in terms of, back to Mayor Buck's comments too about partnerships and getting communities kind of working together maybe towards some of these things. So a question to be asked for sure. And then just as a reminder, this conversation, we can go as long as we want this evening. There's no rush. I think this is an important topic, so we need to, feel comfortable with where we're at and where we're going. So if you've got the questions or comments, let's make sure we're getting those made. Mayor Lyle Smith, you're next.
Thank you. So I'll make a comment about Commissioner Schrader's question. For example, Oregon City doesn't have a housing program. We have a homelessness program that we're working on, but we don't have the ability, and we don't have the staff or the capability right now to just stand up housing. So to say we could use ARPA dollars in theory, sure, but we don't have any staff. We don't have a program that is prepared to invest in housing. So I think that's part of some of our barriers, and it's an active discussion at the city level as to whether or not is our city big enough. Larger cities definitely have housing programs. We don't. And I've been pushing for a housing staff member for a couple of years now and haven't gotten it yet. So, but we're growing, so it'll probably happen eventually. I have two questions, and I think they're short and easy. One is about warming shelters. So I feel like the county over the summer did a really great job of setting up a range of cooling shelters across the county. So it spread out the need of shelters and where people were going during events of really hot weather. I feel like we need the same thing for warming shelters, and I'm not sure that I see the county doing that. I feel like Oregon City is kind of this beacon of a warming shelter, and we know that a lot of people gravitate to our warming shelter. And so I'm wondering if the county could comment on that, anybody from the county, on being proactive about having regional warming shelters like you do similar during the summer for cooling, for hot events. Anybody?
Yeah, I don't have my notes on the warming center in front of me, but I can say that we just presented to the board 2 days ago now on our plans for the warming centers. That's also coming out of social services primarily. And we actually did a procurement this year so we can set up several locations across the county. There's anywhere from, I'll see if I can remember some of these, but I know Estacada was in the mix, Malala, Oregon City, you're working with Father's Heart. So I know you guys are working with them to try to figure that piece out. Who else? We had, I think the Services Center down there on 82nd. So we do have like 4 or 5 in the hopper. And we were negotiating with like 3 or 4 more. Sorry, I'm not giving you specifics. I can get back to you and get you those, but we are trying to spread that out. And and so that too, like I said, we have churches starting to contact us who are also interested. And we did a program under the Heat Dome that Gary allowed last time, and we kind of stood that up overnight, but that's when we had that heat wave, and we were able to actually use our own building, our DSB building, for one night to handle people who were coming in with heat stroke. So the county's all in, and we're looking for more buildings and spaces. And the model we're trying to use is where we're giving those funds to nonprofits who do this type of work, the wraparound services, to actually provide the services at the several sites. So we're really just looking for sites. So if you know of any, again, churches, schools, other types of civic organizations who are willing to allow for those us to stand things up overnight and work those, we are again looking for partnerships in those areas. And right now we only have 32 slots secured, but we're looking to get it up to 200, and we think that will cover any events that we have in the next few months. The cold weather events. And we're
Right.
also getting ready for smoke, and we're getting ready for heat again. So we're trying to plan now 6 months in advance of the actual events.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And I saw Gary Schmidt put a link in there. I'll look at that. And then my second question is probably more for Vahid. I've been told by our boots on the ground that the hotel motel transitional housing has been very successful in transitioning folks to permanent housing, that it was really needed as part of the kind of chain of service provision in order to really help someone be successful in getting out of their houseless situation. And so I'm wondering, I don't know that I have enough info. I know I heard that the hotel motel current situation has been funded with ARPA dollars. I'm wondering if you could characterize how much of this housing, this type of housing, is being created or maintained with these housing dollars? Because I feel like there's a lot of money going in other areas, talking about permanent housing and stuff like that. But I've heard that part of the problem with permanent housing is a lot of houseless folks need that transition period in order to get their lives on track, to get everything kind of set up in order to help them be really successful to move on to the more permanent housing. And so I want to make sure we're not missing a gap here. And I was just wondering if you could characterize how much work is being done in that particular arena.
Yes, and I just noticed that Commissioner Savas, you put your hand up and unmuted. You want to hop on this one first? I'm happy to provide some information.
Sure. Once you go ahead, Vahid, I'll just build on what you speak to.
Great. Yeah, and thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith. And I have spoken with Oregon City Police Chief Band a number of times, and with the Father's Heart leadership and my beloved friends with Love One, who do so much amazing work with folks experiencing homelessness in Oregon City and in that neighborhood. And yes, the motel program has been a boon to all of the above, right? It's been a resource where folks like the police and Love One and the Father's Heart could refer really vulnerable and endangered individuals experiencing homelessness on the street who are sick, and to get safely off the streets. The commitment of the ARPA dollars to fund that program and until such time as everyone that's served now is permanently housed is a great step. And that's really doing exactly what you're talking about. It's moving folks, very fragile, vulnerable people, out of harm's way, stabilized for a short period of time, and then moved into permanent housing. And it does require, in some instances, long relationship building between a service worker, a service provider, and a person experiencing homelessness to really get there. And Chief Band speaks eloquently about that, and I think that's correct. Sometimes it does take some time to build trust and relationship. So we will need emergency safety off the streets resources moving forward. The Veterans Village is a model of this type that provides transitional shelter in a community for veterans experiencing homelessness. So we've expanded that beyond its initial 15 units to more than 20 now. The plan does commit to the expansion of our capacity in this space in emergency shelter and safety off the streets. I think that the Board of County Commissioners, and I think at this point I'm going to segue to Commissioner Savas, but the Board of County Commissioners had a policy session. Was that this week? I mean, time is so strange. I think that was this week, about motel shelter and the strategies and kind of the pros and cons of this way and that way. So there are active conversations at the county, both by elected leadership and within my team, about the best way to achieve those goals moving forward. But there's no question that those goals still remain our goals.
Yeah, thanks, Vahid. And thank you, Mayor, for the question. It's something that's kind of near and dear to a lot of us on the commission. The Veterans Village project was not solely, by any means, just for veterans. It was really a pilot to prove, number one, that the governance model, the management model, the transitional model is something that was actually viable, and it could we do it in a way that it didn't create any neighborhood problems, so we could grow it. So that's our intent. The board has been, in the last several weeks, for example, has really been, we've been really asking our staff to come together with everything they're working on for shelters, warming shelters and all hotel shelters and everything. And then we added to that on Tuesday in our work session to make sure we're covering more transitional. And the good news now versus what it was several years ago when we did the veteran shelter is that a lot of these tiny homes or shelters are now built with more amenities inside there, like plumbing and small appliances and so forth. So there is a lot of advancement. So we really want to grow that program. We're always looking for sites, and those sites don't have to be in unincorporated. They can be in a city. So we are anxiously looking for anyone who wants to host those or provide the property. And Eugene and Lane County, Eugene, Springfield, Lane County has done that as a partnership. So the city and the county work together on that, and they provided a number of models, and we've actually kind of emulate some of the successes they've had down there. So we're anxiously growing. And while I've got that, I did want to add a couple of things. I've been taking some notes here. We started out in June addressing all the things that Vahid spoke to, and the minimum to get there was $10 million. So we initiated a $10 million budget, but didn't identify the dollars. We are now identifying those dollars. We have bumped it to 10 to 12 million, and as of Tuesday to 14.2 million. So as today, we've ramped up that program to 14.2. And what was kind of alluded to, and I want to make it more pronounced here and clear, is that there's Vahid speaking from the Housing Authority, HAC, we call it, and then Rod is really representing the H3S. There is a lot of programming that we do that is not labeled or to be funded with supporting housing services that has been going on for years. And so a lot of those are supportive services or wraparound services. So there's a lot of things that are going on that people don't see or are aware of. So what the supportive housing services dollars are doing, even though there's not much of it we're borrowing, thank you Metro for the loan, this adds on to those services. So this is very complimentary. So it's all good. And I just want to make that point that the supportive housing service program in and of itself is not everything we're doing. We are doing a lot more, and just want to point that out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Can I ask a piece for Trent? That link that Gary shared, will you make sure that gets, if you would, please make sure it gets into the meeting notes or out to the C4 group here to look at?
Absolutely. I have other things that we'll be sharing, so that'll be in the update with the other things.
Great. Thank you. Next up is Mayor Fitzgerald, and then after that is Mayor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just say how I appreciate all of the work that is going into this complex problem from all the cities and the county and Metro. And that to one of the points that was brought up earlier about how can the cities collaborate and coordinate better with the county. I think that is, we're doing that right now, having this conversation, but I would like to ask for a way to start some system, not that we probably do need more systems, but for example, in Wilsonville, we are going to, or planning to use some of our ARPA dollars to add some mental health and social services staffing capacity, so that when our public safety people find a vulnerable person in need of assistance, they can not only talk to them and try to connect them to these services and find better connections than they have in the past, but also probably be able to provide better direct counseling to them. We're working with Clackamas County Mental Health on some plans there, but I know that our city manager has been in touch with Gary Schmidt, and they've had some conversations, but basically the gist of it is I would really like to see some plans for ways to coordinate the progress that some cities have made and that other cities like Wilsonville are starting to make so that we can all get better traction out of the dollars that we have and that we can efficiently connect with the opportunities that Clackamas County is developing that Commissioner Savas just described. So I don't know how we do that, but I think better and more communication to keep us moving forward would be something to work on, and we'd be glad to be a part of it.
So Mayor Fitzgerald, are you like envisioning more updates to this group on what's going on? Kind of what are you envisioning?
Well, for example, one of the concepts is to make sure that we know where there are resources, how do we get vouchers, when we find that there is a person who needs immediate housing and our staff or the people we have can't find that, where are some resources that we can go to? Also, we have one of the discussions we had is if there are people, staff members and resources in our cities working directly with these vulnerable populations, there's a thought that if they are in contact and coordinate among themselves, they may be able to directly help these vulnerable people more quickly. So it's the opposite of disconnected one-offs all over this region. So it's a way to coordinate that.
Great, thank you.
Sorry for dropping my phone.
All right, Mayor Walters.
Thank you, and thank you for this meeting. It's been very helpful. I'm interested in talking a little bit about the homeless youth in Clackamas County and how we're doing outreach to connect and support homeless youth, especially those that are at risk. You know, studies out of UCLA show that roughly 40% of homeless youth in the United States are LGBTQ+. Who are we connecting with to make sure that those kids are being housed, especially now during COVID, when perhaps they were couch surfing before with other families, and that may not be as practical when people are trying to stay healthy and safe. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that and find out if you have partnerships also with Clackamas ESD or individual school districts to help identify some people that may need assistance. Thank you.
Yeah, real quickly, and Vahid's really the expert on this, but I do know we at our coordinated care level, that's an advisory group of different constituents and stakeholders. There is a youth group that specifically was formed to talk about homelessness. And I can't speak to you know, what they're working on today, and maybe Vahid or someone could, but they do exist and they're ongoing. And I believe that they're also, if the school districts, at least when I was involved in school districts, they each had a homeless person embedded in the schools that would identify kids who were couch surfing and otherwise homeless. And so I believe that still exists. And so there is great opportunity for us to create a system, create more integration between our efforts. And I think, again, with someone like a city mayor saying to a school superintendent or a building principal that you have an interest in that, I mean, connecting school to community, that's like an awesome way to really cover the whole all families. And so we would be in with you on that. So anything we can do through our youth group or otherwise, yeah, we should make that part of our plan to move forward.
Thank you. So I would love to reach out to you, Mr. Cook, and perhaps talk with you more about that and how I can assist.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mayor Walters. I know like in Canby, at the Canby High School, there is an actual coordinator there that's on staff to help coordinate these types of concerns and issues for students at Canby High School. In Canby School District, we have some 300 quote unquote houseless or homeless kids that are truly either are homeless or couch surfing. And so it's a full-time job to have someone coordinating that. And because of that, there's a nonprofit started that helps those students with food and clothing and things like that. So it might be worth reaching out to the, you know, local high school to see, or school district to see what might be already in place and already going regarding that aspect. But it's a challenge, and it's a great question and partnership for sure. Oh, thank you. Mayor Fitzgerald, did you have something else? No, okay. Commissioner Schrader.
I know I've got a dog sitting in my lap wiggling around, so hopefully I can be coherent here. I just want to thank our staff for all the work they've been doing with this. This has been a long haul for them. This has been a pretty complex problem. I would really like to see if this group can have some kind of a subcommittee on housing where we take a look across the county, not just urban, but rural, because we have homelessness problems, houselessness problems, not only in our urban areas. And most of the dollars from this particular levy is really concentrated on the urban areas. So I would like to see our rural communities join with our urban cities to take a look at what we're doing well, what are the differences, what are the gaps, and how can we make sure in both urban and rural communities we're addressing this problem? Because it is a bit different in our urban area versus our rural area. And right now, one of my concerns has been, this has been very concentrated in urban areas. And I think that's where a great deal of the problem lies, and I'm willing to work on that too. But I think that one of the things that has to happen is we have to look at this as a whole county. And I think that this group is the group where we can land on that. And I also think that it will inform pretty much both rural and urban strategies to take over this houseless issue that we've been dealing with. So that's just my take on that. And I also think that we will have strong leadership with our superintendents. I strongly suggest that we include those folks in any plans that we move forward with, and that as we build this infrastructure together, that it comes from the ground up, not from the top down. So that's just my soapbox for the night. But I really want to thank Fahid and Rod and Gary for being here, and all of our mayors for recognizing rural, urban, suburban, whatever, that we are going to have to be in this together, because it's growing. The problem has grown and we have to grow with it, and we can't all do it alone. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. Appreciate that. I'm noticing additional links popping up in the chat box, so appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I know we'll get those included in the notes. Any additional comments or thoughts before kind of moving into just kind of wrapping things up here for the evening? Yes, Mr. Myers.
Hi. First of all, great presentations on a very complex issue. I have two questions. The first is actually out to the incorporated areas, the mayors and the commissioner members from the cities. In September, we felt, the executive committee felt a sense of urgency on this issue, and that's why we devoted this whole evening to homelessness and houselessness and housing in Clackamas County. I want to ask, maybe if you could add to the chat area, what else we need? Is there something here that hasn't been addressed, as good as this was and as broad as it was? Are there something that's missing here? Are there areas that should be further explored? I heard one comment that there is from Mayor Fitzgerald that there's a need for understanding where the resources are located. I'm just wondering how else C4 can serve the incorporated areas on this particular issue. And if you wouldn't mind chatting or at least letting us know how we can help. Second question is really to presenters, or maybe perhaps to the administrators task force that I heard referenced. In September, I think one of the concerns was a disparity between what was expected to come in from Metro tax and what had actually been received. And I was surprised not to hear a question on this from any of the cities. So I'm asking myself, and perhaps I don't need a down on the weeds type of thing, but has the disparities manifested? Have they been resolved? I understand there was a reference to a loan from Metro. I didn't know about that. Perhaps somebody could just briefly address that for me and anybody else is curious. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll start, but I'll have Paul really help fill in. To date, we had anticipated and we've been asked to fund up to $24 million. And to date, through this program, this new regional initiative, we've received $715,000 in SHS dollars. So what we've done is gone to Metro for loans. And we just 4.4 million from Metro. And then basically we did unanimously as a commission vote to use 2.3 million of ARPA dollars. What our concern is this: it's a cash flow issue. It isn't a, we have the political will to move forward with this. We're just trying to budget it so we don't get ourselves into trouble in terms of cash flow. And we're trying to really grow the program being fiscally prudent. And I think that has caused a lot of heartburn with folks out there, but I have to tell you, we can't really speak to other counties' availability or funding or comfort with financial risk. We're trying to really do this without putting ourselves in risk where we borrow a lot of money and have to pay it back with interest. And still the projections won't really give us that amount of money. So what we've been doing as the administrators task force is really looking at the financial trends at least every other week. Commissioner Savas, you can jump in any time with this, and taking a look at how the funds are coming in and what the trends are and what we can do given the dollars that are coming in and what we can prudently use to backfill. Okay. And, you know, there's a saying at the Association of Oregon Counties that if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. And I think that I would like our folks here to understand that we as a county have had 3 federally declared disasters within the last year and a half. That would be COVID, wildfires, and ice storms. And I know our rural folks know that we had to deal with moving people out of the rural areas who are in danger, not only people, but livestock, and find areas and just a tremendous amount of work to make sure that people were safe with that. And then, of course, not only COVID, wildfires, but I think of all the 3 counties, we were most heavily hit with the ice storm, with a good portion of our communities across the county being out without power. So one of the things I want folks to understand before you leave this meeting, that Clackamas County, we didn't receive a CARES direct allocation. And we were only able to get $17 million in non-discretionary reimbursement. So we did not get the same level of funding as our other 2 counties, our colleagues up to the north and the, in the west. And so how we are trying to manage our funds is really based on the fact that until we reach 500,000 people in this county, it appears as if we really won't get that same level of funding. So comparing our infrastructure of what we're doing to other counties, in my mind, is like, comparing apples and oranges. And the other thing is that I would invite all of you, from my perspective, to take a look at our business meeting every week and other housing under H3S, Housing and Human Services, take a look at all the funding that we are allocating from various sources, and that we've been doing this since I've been here in 2003. So that hasn't changed. So there has to be an awareness of who we are as a county, what we're dealing with, what the revenue streams are, and how we're trying to balance in implementation. And I'm not going to say too much, but sometimes I think our neighbors up north don't quite understand the framework that our county as a rural, urban, suburban frontier county is working with. And I do believe we need to get far more credit to our staff for really doing a pretty excellent job with houselessness and homelessness. And, that's just the reality of what we deal with as a county. And Paul, why don't you jump in? Because I just got up on my soapbox. So,
yeah. Well, I just want to close with, Commissioner Schrader and I and our staff are working very hard to find the resources. And one of the delays in the ramping it up even faster has really been the IGA negotiations with, as our staff alluded to at the very beginning. And Councilor Lewis and I have had many conversations about this. And once these are supposed to be wrapped up in June, and it's just been difficult. It's very complex. All three counties and Metro are working on this. And I know they're working on it every day of every week. So we're hoping to get that wrapped up. The good news is if that gets handled, the minute it gets handled and it's settled, and we get the Metro Support Oversight Committee's approval for our LIP plan, how we're rolling it out, we have a green light at that point, as Metro Councilor Lewis has shared. Then we can perhaps make another ask for another $5 million to advance upon the incoming monies and revenues that we anticipate coming in around May, June of next year, 2022. So I think we have the board support for that. Ideally, we have 100% board support, but it's really contingent upon these IGA negotiations to be completed. It has gone on for months longer than any of us foresaw. So, Councilor Lewis, if you could just add anything to that, I appreciate it. But we've had a lot of conversations, and I just again want to publicly thank Metro for giving us the loan to at least advance this programming like we have.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, both commissioners. I just want to be really clear that the IGA negotiations has gotten additional months extension because it's really important to get it right. The three counties are negotiating together. Unfortunately, Multnomah County attorney is in the lead, and I don't think he is the best representation of how urgently we need to get this done. So I do hope that the IGA negotiation rolls up quickly, because then, yes, I would advocate for another loan. The problem here is cash flow. We are on track, despite the auditor's EOR stance early on. We are on track to come into that conservative number, if not better. So we will be getting those monies when people pay their income taxes, which we all know we don't really pay our income taxes until the fourth quarter. Some of us come in right there on midnight in April. So we will monitor closely, work closely, and make sure that we're doing this right. Part of the pressure with the IGA is that it's an IGA that's intended to extend for all 10 years of the program. So a lot of the points of negotiation are around if there's any changes in the future, how they will be implemented or talked about. Because if we were just doing this for 2 years, guys, this would be signed already. And I think it's the uncertainty of the future that's really got people kind of saying, what if? And that's where people are tripped up. But we're in a good spot, I think, I've heard that there's now a mediator involved, and we're in a good spot to not need any more extensions.
Thank you for that. Mayor Hodson, turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, again, on behalf of all of C4, thank you to Mr. Cook and your team here this evening. Vahid and Devin, thank you so much for your presentations and fielding our questions. Definitely a lot of heavy lifting has occurred and there's still much more to do, but we really appreciate you coming and giving us this update. And I think you have some thoughts and ideas coming out of this and where the cities are at and how engaged and involved we want to be. So thank you for that. We're gonna move into, just before we can get out of here, just any quick updates and other business. Is there a JPAC and MPAC updates at all? JPAC, nothing?
Well, there's, Mayor, there's a lot going on. But I'm not sure we want to broach that here tonight. I will give everyone an update to let them know that the county, our county staff, transportation staff, are putting together a diversion committee to deal with the potential diversion challenges or communication to ODOT. So some of you have already got the invites in the metro region that are near along the corridor. We're looking forward to that, and hopefully we can give you a report when we have some more time. There's a lot of stuff going on at the Region 1 Act. Mayor, I'll get both of those. You were at the meeting on Monday night. They have gone from meeting every other month to actually meeting as two different organizations every month. One as the normal R1 Act, and the other group meeting on the alternate month is called the R1 Act Plus, which brought in some membership from Washington State, Clark County, the city of Vancouver, and so on. And it's all about really the tolling and some of the capital projects. The interstate bridge, I-5 bridge, is one of the projects that has been introduced here in the last several months. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of moving pieces, but the congestion pricing conversation and the tolling conversation is getting, it's really tenuous. It's very complex. And I think as we move forward, we'll have a better idea, but I'm really sensing that there's not a whole lot of answers or solutions to diversion. And it seems like we're creating more problems. This is Paul personal. What I see is we're creating a lot more problems with this tolling program that we're solving. And our initial issue for supporting I-205 was to ease up or eliminate any kind of diversion because of the bottleneck that's there. And now with tolling, we're actually creating a 24/7 situation where people will be inclined to divert, to go around the tolling. So we'll keep on working at this. ODOT initially promised that we would get some transit dollars out of this tolling revenue, and then we found out that there's a constitutional snag there. What constitutionally it's not legal. So we've got some barriers. So we're not really sure we have a means to actually get transit funding out of this. So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you all informed as things roll out.
Thank you. Mayor Lyle Smith.
Yes, I can give a really quick update on impact. So the last impact meeting, the primary topic was we talked about regional solid waste, and we got essentially an update from Metro on just the regional solid waste program, talking about rate increases that went into effect this past July. We talked about recycling and recycling facilities. And then we also got an update on Senate Bill 582, which passed in this last legislative session, that really kind of seemed to kind of change the face of recycling. It put the state in the decision role on deciding what's on the recycling list and how best to collect specific products. And apparently there's rulemaking advisory committee that's forming now to implement the directives coming out of Senate Bill 582. So that's kind of all the notes that I have. And of course, the Metro redistricting was also a topic where we got a brief update from Councillor Lewis, but we've also received some information recently via email on the redistricting process. So if you're interested in that, there's information on the Metro website. And I know I'm probably not doing it justice, but Metro does have to draw new maps, and they are due by early December. So likely in November and early December, Yeah, so that's it. Due early December. And I don't really have much more on that. So I would look on the Metro site if you're interested in the redistricting and more information there.
Councilor Lewis just made a comment about that there's redistricting hearings coming up Tuesday and Wednesday evenings of next week, if you want to weigh in on that. Okay. Climate Action Plan Task Force update.
Our meeting was canceled at the last minute today, so we're going to have a longer meeting on the 18th. That'll be our last meeting this winter. We've kind of gone from goals to strategy to actual plans and detailed plans of how to achieve those results while weighing in factors for consideration. And I'm not going to go into all the details. One of my favorite ones was just considering the county's ability to implement our ideas. It will go over the next several months after the 18th to the public for their input, and then we'll meet again in the spring.
Great, thank you for that. Commissioner Savas, Mr. Wilson, do we have any other business to bring up or address?
I don't believe so. Trent?
Yes, I have a couple of updates. They'll go really fast, I promise. The first one is really important. Councilor Heisey wanted to be sure that it was shared today, which is that the Regional Mobility Pricing Project is having several workshops registering that start for next week, and I am currently...
Trent, you just went mute.
I sure did. I'm currently posting those into the chat right now. So you can register for those. Those are Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Please do check into those, and you can also watch them live if you don't register. So that is one of the tolling updates. Remember that ODOT is coming back to C4 for the December meeting to talk about tolling. So that will be more of that, because they are having many milestones that they're reaching basically month by month right now. On that same topic, this group has asked that a tolling diversion subcommittee be formed. And so many of y'all have voiced interest in taking part in a doodle poll in that. And so at least there were jurisdictions that were adjacent to the project. So that first meeting has actually now been scheduled. It'll be on not next Monday, but the Monday after. So it's November 15th. So that's coming up. And it's been open invitation if you want to participate in that or not. That's been sort of an at-will sort of subcommittee. If you'd like to participate, just let me know. Please send me an email. One more update is that the county's after action report for both the fire and ice storm has just finalized as of last week. That is a topic that has been of much interest to many of you, so I'm happy to share that, and I will do that when I send out the update email here shortly. And then I want to go back to the ARPA comments that were made earlier. If there's an interest by any cities to participate or partner with the county related to ARPA, I am part of the ARPA committee, so I am a happy resource for you cities. If you'd like to work with the county on that, please let me know. I'll work with Gary Schmidt or Nancy Bush, who's also here today, and we'll make sure that those connections are made. So just want you to know that we are a resource for that. And finally, I'd like to close with just my appreciation to the staff here tonight. This is a great example of why I continue to work for Clackamas County. I love this job and I love the team that I work with. We do really great work here, and I'm happy to put them in front of you anytime because of the great work that they do.
Trent, thank you for your hard work.
Certainly. Thank you, Trent. Thank you to staff. Appreciate it. I will close with the one agenda item that we didn't get to was trying to prioritize retreat topics for future meetings and conversations. Please take a look at that list. If you have thoughts, ideas, please feel free to reach out to either myself, Commissioner Savas, Matthew Silva with the fire districts, Martin Myers, and then there he is, and Paul Gornick. Those are your executive board members along with Mayor Stemple. So please reach out to them and share your thoughts. I'm sure the e-board will talk about it at our next meeting, and we will see this on a future agenda to talk about even further. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Have a pleasant November. Have a great Thanksgiving. There is still a tremendous amount to be thankful for, even in the chaos that is our world right now and the constant state of change, but there's lots to be thankful for. So have a great rest of November, and we'll see everyone in December. Thank you all for being here tonight. Great conversation.